Most amateur photographers know that they've got to stop down their aperture to get more of their scene in focus, and they've been told to use f11, f16, even f22. And so when they're out on a shoot, that's exactly what they do. They stop down their lens, they nail the exposure, they come home feeling good about the images that they've just taken, they open up the image on the computer and, well, maybe the foreground is a bit soft, or the background's a bit soft, or on a bad day, maybe both ends of the distance that they're shooting are not very sharp. And they can't figure out why, because, well, they believe that they did everything right. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you how to get every part of your scene, foreground, midground, and background, completely razor sharp every single time, not by stopping your lens further down and hoping for the best, but by using a method called focus stacking, and more importantly, understanding exactly why certain scenes that you're shooting physically cannot be sharp from front to back unless you focus stack them using my method. Now, my name is Will and I am a multi-award winning landscape photographer and photography coach, and this isn't just another use f16 or f22 and hope it comes out okay video, because quite frankly, that is terrible advice that I see from tons of photographers on YouTube. And when you understand why this is terrible advice, you're never going to be able to look at another landscape photo the same way ever again. Now, before we get any further, if you'd rather have someone walk you through all of this in a live, interactive way, rather than trying to piece this together yourself using bits of YouTube videos here and there, check out my Landscape Mastery training program in the description below. So, why is it impossible to capture some landscape scenes sharp from front to back, even if you stop your lens down to an absurd aperture like f22? Well, it's because your lens, any lens, can only actually focus at one specific distance at one specific point in time. There's only one space, one point in front of your lens where the light rays coming in through the glass converge perfectly on your sensor and create a genuinely sharp point. Everything else either side of that point, well, the rays don't quite converge on the sensor. They create tiny circular discs instead of points. And these discs have a name. They're called, confusingly, the circles of confusion. Now, depth of field, or the part of your image where things look sharp, isn't a true zone of complete, utter pinpoint sharpness. It's a zone where those blurry discs are small enough that your eye just accepts them as sharp. So you've got perfect focus. This is where the light rays converge exactly at a pinpoint on your sensor. You then have slightly out of focus, where these blurry discs are small enough where they still look sharp to our eyes. And then we have where the light rays are completely out of focus, where these discs get big enough that our eyes see the image as blurry. So what we call depth of field in our photography, in our images, is essentially where the blurry discs are acceptably sharp to our eyes. So, Will, what has this got to do with aperture? Well, a narrow aperture like f11 or f16 makes that zone of acceptable focus deeper. This is because the narrower cone of light that's entering the lens means that the light rays themselves are more parallel, so even though they're not perfectly in focus, overall they are smaller and so acceptably sharp. Which then begs the question, why don't we just keep stopping down the aperture of our lens until the whole scene is in focus? That'd be pretty simple and pretty easy, right? An easy fix to this problem. Well, unfortunately, another optical phenomenon stops that plan right in its tracks. Past a certain aperture, usually around f11 to f16, depending on your camera, you're going to run into what's called diffraction. Now, diffraction is where light bends as it squeezes through a small aperture or an opening, and that bending of light softens your image. So you've now traded a shallow depth of field that leaves either the background or the foreground of your photo out of acceptable focus for diffraction, which keeps a lot more of the image in focus but softens the whole thing altogether. And even setting diffraction softness aside for just 1 second, some scenes where you're shooting close to your foreground element, well, you're simply just not going to be able to come out of a sharp photo from front to back, no matter what aperture you use on your lens. The physics of the optics that you're using is just simply not going to allow it. A subject that's 6 inches or a foot away from the front of your lens and a background that's 7 miles away, even at f32 or some crazy aperture, if your lens even lets you get to that point, is not going to have enough depth of field to cover both of the elements within your scene. So, what do we do? Well, this is where focus stacking comes in, and it's a lot more straightforward than it actually sounds. Focus stacking is, well, exactly what it sounds like. Instead of taking one photo and hoping that the depth of field that you've captured there covers everything, instead you take a series of shots, usually 3 to 5 of them, where the sharp area or zone of each of these photos overlaps with the one before it. Then you combine them all together and you've got an incredibly sharp photo across the entirety of your scene. And the process to capturing them is dead simple as well. You start by focusing a shot at the front of the scene that you're capturing, and then you move to the middle and then a little bit further back until you capture all of the scene, again in these zones of focus where we can then stitch them together in Photoshop. Now, the key here is that you shoot at a sensible aperture as you're taking these images that are going to be focus stacked, somewhere between f8 or f11. Why is this important? Well, because the whole point of focus stacking is that each image is genuinely sharp in its zone that it's capturing, and it's not compromised by diffraction. You can think of this process like laying roof tiles. Each one of these roof tiles is going to overlap, so there's no gaps, so there's no leaks. And that's exactly what we're building with our series of shots that are going to be focus stacked. So let me show you exactly how to do this out in the field. So I've set my aperture to f8 so that I've only got to take 3 photos to get everything sharp from front to back. I then focus on the closest point to me and I take a shot. Then I focus about 1/3 of the way into the scene, I take another shot. And then I take a final shot on the far mid-ground that gets everything sharp from that point to infinity. So now you've got your images, it's time to import them into Lightroom as normal, and then we're going to use a focus stacking workflow in Photoshop to get them stacked in just a few simple clicks. Okay, so in Lightroom, select your images by clicking on one, holding Shift, clicking on the final image that you want to stack, right click, go Edit In, and then select Open as Layers in Photoshop. Once you have all your layers, select the top layer, click Shift, select your bottom layer so we can select all of them, then go to File, Auto Align Layers, Auto, and let's align these layers up. We need to do this because even on a tripod there can be tiny shifts between the shots. It could be a gust of wind, it could be your camera settling slightly, it could also be focus breathing when you change the focus points that you are shooting at. Now with all of the layers selected, we're going to go to File, Auto Blend Layers, Stack Images, select Seamless Tones and Colors, and click OK. And what Photoshop has done here is pretty clever. It's added a mask to each one of these layers. In the mask, the white part of the mask reveals the image that it's associated with. The black part of the mask is blocking that image. So here you can see this is the sky coming through, this is the midground coming through, and this is the foreground coming through. And all together we now have a razor sharp image from the very bottom of the frame to the middle of the frame to the very back of it. And honestly, this works 99% of the time. The only thing that you may have to do at this point is go to original ratio, just crop your image very slightly, because when it aligns the image, it may leave a few pixels either side as the images have been aligned on top of each other. And now you're looking at a photo that's sharper than any single frame could have ever even dreamt of producing. And here's something that's worth understanding about what's going on under the hood in Photoshop when it's blending our images with layer masks. When Photoshop builds the masks, what it's doing is it's scanning each of these layers for edge contrast. So it's looking for transitions between light bits of the image and dark parts of the image where it can see sharpness, because the dark bits are very dark and the light bits are very light and they are very close together. It's looking for crisp details in that particular part of the frame, and that's how it decides what to include in each one of the layer masks. And remember that the white parts of the mask reveal the image and the black parts of the image block it coming through. And this is exactly why the infield technique matters so much. If each one of your shots is genuinely sharp in that zone that you're trying to capture with that particular photo, then Photoshop has a strong, clear set of information or just data and pixels to work with. It can see the difference between the sharp foreground layer and the soft background layer, and it can separate them very cleanly. If you give Photoshop messy raw data, or if you use an aperture that is too large and so you've got a shallow depth of field within the shot, then Photoshop is going to have a very difficult time stitching all of this together. It's not going to be able to do a very good job. Now, sometimes Photoshop does make a bit of a mess of this focus stacking process when you use the automated process that we just ran through. And I want to be straight with you about that, because sometimes it does happen every now and again. Perhaps there was some movement between your shots, the water moved, the grasses moved in the breeze, branches moved, whatever it was. The auto blend can get confused within Photoshop when there is something going on like that. And you end up with halos around edges, you end up with weird smearing effects, bits of the photo that just playing out of focus when you know that you've captured a frame where they are in focus. Usually it's kind of obvious when it goes wrong. And when it does, you've got two options. You can either try to adjust and fix the masks that Photoshop has generated, or you can bin them off completely and do it entirely manually by yourself. And here is the thing. Once you've done the manual method of focus stacking a few times by creating your own layer masks, you're probably going to prefer it. Why? Well, it gives you complete control over exactly what parts of each photo are going to be sharp and where these transitions sit. And for landscape photographers like you and I, where we've probably got strong opinions about how an image should look, that tends to matter to us. So let's jump back onto the computer and I'm going to show you how to focus stack your images manually so you can stay in complete control of the end result. Okay, so I want to focus blend image 40 with image 43. So image 40 has the foreground in focus because that's where I focused when I took the shot, and 43 has the background in focus because that's where I focused when I took the shot there. So I'm going to select both images, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Similar to before, I'm going to click the top image, hold shift, click the bottom image, then go to file, and I'm going to auto align layers because we may have had focus breathing, which is going to slightly adjust each of these layers. As you can see here, there's 1 or 2 pixels at the very edge of the screen here. You see that shift that has happened with the shot itself. So now I've got my 2 layers. Next, I'm going to add a layer mask to this top layer. I'm then going to hold Control-I to invert it. So now the top layer is completely blocked because black blocks and white reveals. Next, I'm going to use a manual selection to select the part of the image that I want to reveal, which is the back part of this top frame, which is in focus. And I'm going to do that with the quick selection tool. So I'm now going to just select the parts of the image that I want to paint over in a second. And you can see some parts of this selection are pretty good and some are terrible. So once we've got with selection, we can come in and then refine it. So if we want to remove, we can press Control and paint out that part of the selection here. And we want to be pretty accurate with this as we go through it. So we can get rid of all of this, because that is a little bit further back in the frame. And sure, this takes a little bit of time, but that time is what's getting you the accuracy over doing this manually and hoping that Photoshop is going to do a good job and manage itself. So now we've got our selection, it means that we can paint in it without going over the edges. So if I pull up our selection in the layer mask, I press B for brush, and I create a big white brush, you can see I'm going to paint down here and nothing's coming through. But as soon as I move over to that selection, we're only painting within the lines. And now if we deselect our selection, we can see we've got a background that is fully sharp because it has been masked in with the white area manually, and we've got a foreground which is razor sharp as well because that is the bottom image, that is the bottom layer to these 2 images. Now naturally this takes a bit longer than doing the automated method in Photoshop, but it's more deliberate. And what you end up with is a complete knowledge of exactly where each zone of sharpness is coming from because you painted it in precisely rather than having Photoshop just guess at it. Now, I've been helping landscape photographers work through focus stacking and all the other techniques that are required to create consistently sharp, professional looking images for a good couple of years now. And the thing that I see with photographers who try these processes is, well, it usually takes a round or 2 of reviewing their images and giving them some feedback before it really clicks. So if you've been getting stuck with the same inconsistent amateur results despite seemingly doing what all of these tutorials on YouTube say, then it's probably not your fault and it's probably not your technique or process that is the problem. You likely just need a little bit of coaching to level up your photography, and that's exactly what I do in my Landscape Mastery program. There's a link in the description if you want to learn a little bit more about it. But focus stacking is only useful if the individual shots that you're taking are genuinely sharp to begin with. And there's one thing that you need to master to create razor sharp photos that are worth all this effort of focus stacking them, and I cover it in this very video. So if you want to understand what makes a landscape photo so sharp that when you zoom into it at 200%, it makes your eyes bleed, then check this video out.